And I am joined today by Mandy Robotham to talk about her brand new book, Mrs. Spy, which comes out on the 15th of May. I'm getting confused with dates. The year's just going way too quickly. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about Mrs. Spy, which is, as the title would actually indicate, a spy novel, but it is a spy novel. I'd say a spy novel with a slight difference in that there is a woman is the main spy.
Yep.
And I loved the intrigue in it, and I also found that the start of it really set the scene really well.
I hope so.
Doesn't always in a book. It doesn't always, to be fair. So for those who haven't seen the book on any promotional site yet or haven't read the blurb, can you tell us a bit about the book, obviously with no spoilers?
No spoilers. So the book is set in London in 1965, my favourite era to write about. So we're in the middle of a sort of hip, not quite swinging didn't come in until 66, but hip London. But we are with Maggie Flynn, she's 45. She's a widow, she's a mother, she's a daughter. But she's also a surveillance officer for MI5, and how she became that surveillance officer will becomes very evident as you read the book on. But that's what she spends her day doing, is observing. Apparently MI5 had the most admired watcher service in the world for some time. They were much revered. So she's part of this group that call themselves the Donkeys, and they watch anyone really. They watch government officials, they watch Russian spies, they watch anyone that MI5 needs observing. So she spends her days in disguises, various hats on. She's always pulling out her knitting. She's that middle-aged woman that you would struggle to describe. You know, she just melts into the background with her cup of tea and her knitting.
I love the fact that one of the first things you really hear from her is about her bunions.
Yes, she's got a bunion, poor lamb, and it flares up and the most inconvenient times does her bunion. But if you're a middle-aged woman, as I am, these are the things that you know are prominent in your day-to-day life. You know, they're not all running around like you know, lithe, skinny. You know, not everyone can be Keira Knightley in Black Doves, put it that way.
I think one of the things I really liked about this was the fact that every character was so real, and obviously Maggie is made even more so by the inclusion of her mother Gilda, who is very much a part of the early stages of the swinging 60s. She's very free, and I'd say not quite hippy dippy, but she is a little bit more easy than her daughter. And then of course you have Libby. And then you have Libby, her daughter, who is desperate to get tickets for the newest Beatles gig.
Yes, yeah, and that's sort of, so that runs through the whole of the book, is this desperation to keep all these balls in the air with home life and you know, work, and then she's got to find these dratted tickets which are like gold dust, and she doesn't want to let her daughter down. And in the midst of all this, she discovers something about her dead husband. And again, no spoilers, but she discovers something very crucial about her dead husband and about the life that she didn't know he led. And that leads her on quite a big trail to discover actually who was the man that she was married to for a long time.
Because of course the book does begin with a prologue that seems very random before you start getting into the core of the plot, with the death of her husband. And there are so many things, as you said, you discover going onwards that is sort of like, well, this doesn't add up, and why did that happen, and what exactly is going on here, because that shouldn't have been the way things were done.
Yeah, well, hope so. I mean, that's the whole point of spy fiction, isn't it? I read a lot of spy fiction, is that you have to have these kind of twisty, intricate plots, and you know, if you I actually can't read Le Carrier very much. I find him quite difficult to read, but I do listen to audiobooks of Le Carrier, and you have to listen really hard because the plots are so beautifully intricate. And if you zone out for a minute or so, you've probably lost the thread of what George Smiley is thinking, you know. So
yeah. I read a book recently that was science fiction that did exactly the same. It was a very short novel, and if I looked away for a moment, or I heard something, or I answered a text message, I was like, what was I reading?
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to keep with it. So this is, I would say, it's a light spy novel. This isn't terribly intricate. There is some light passages in it. Maggie's quite self-deprecating. She realizes, you know, she's not spy of the century. But it's about, I think, about a real woman, you know, who has issues with her waistline, and issues with her waistline as she gets older. You know, she needs to get to the hairdressers far more, but she just hasn't got time. So I think she's a real person, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. She's juggling the balls of her family, her work life, her own emotional struggles, because obviously discovering certain things about her husband does take a toll. But there are certain things when you're reading through the book, and you've got the way that she observes even random people when she's not working. I love those paragraphs of average man, brown hair, and walking this way. I loved that aspect of it because you get to see the way her mind works.
Yeah, and she's always on duty. You know, she could be officially off duty, but she's always a watcher in her mind. So she's always watching out for that unusual person, who they would, and yeah, so she's always on point, as it were, and she has to be with everything that unfolds.
Yeah, that's it. There are moments where you're thinking, well, she's just on a bus journey, and something clicks with her because she is always on it.
Yeah, and that's a true spy. I think that's a true agent or a spy.
Absolutely. And obviously with the way that she is, you do see, even in the names that people call her, you see the different sides of her as a person, because obviously her husband referred to her as Mags. Then you've got Frank, her colleague, her closer colleague, who refers to her as Magpie.
Yeah.
And I love that. That felt very intimate, but not in a sexual way. It felt very, you're my friend and I treasure you.
Yeah, he's very much a sort of uncle style character, is Frank. Frank's an ex copper, ex DCI, whose ex-wife sort of basically fleeced him for all the divorce money. So he can't afford to retire, so he has to be a watcher. Frank's a great character, and he just rolled out of me. I don't know where he came from. I thought afterwards that actually he probably is based on my late dad, who died about 12 years ago. But some of the things that Frank said, my dad was a born and bred Londoner. He wasn't a copper, but he was a born and bred Londoner. And some of the things that Frank comes out, it's just sort of thing that used to roll out of my dad all the time. So I think I was probably channeling my dad's voice as Frank came out. And we've had, through the years of my growing up, I've known lots of people like Frank.
And also, so you've said that you think Frank may have been inspired by your dad and obviously other people in your life at various times. What about Maggie and the other characters in the book? Were they inspired by people you know, or was it just a case of inspiration, which I really envy?
I just thought, well, the entire inspiration for the novel was watching all those Bond films, as you do when you're growing up. We were a telly-led, cinema-led family, and every time I went to see a Bond film, and James Bond would be presented with this file, and it said top secret on the front of this file, and inside the file would be lots of bits of paper detailing this, and this, and lots of photographs of people, like, we've seen this Russian spy here, there, and I just kept thinking, well, who does that? Who does all that legwork so that you can just hand it to the super spy at the end of it?
Yeah.
And so that's where it really came from. I thought, who is that person? And there are, have been women spies since time immemorial. You know, you're talking back as fast, you know, forever, really.
Yeah.
We just don't know about them quite so much. And now, fortunately, they're coming out. You know, female spies are big at the moment. And Claire Hubbard Hall has just written a fantastic non-fiction book about all the sort of near on invisible women that, you know, from the last century, who've been really, really prevalent in our nation's security. And so I thought, yeah, this character is going to be a woman. And I think I drew in Maggie just loads of things from my friends. You know, when we all sit around having coffee, talking about our ailments, and as you do when you get to a certain age, you know, you have to have a bit of ailment chat before you get onto some other things. And so I think Maggie is definitely an amalgam of all the different people I know, but her inspiration came out of watching those Bond films.
I was going to say, because the most famous female spy was Mata Hari.
But, you know, a few people know that Mata Hari was actually a mother, and she was you know, she had to go and do spying because she got the bad end of a divorce settlement, and she was penniless. So, you know, she wasn't always in that belly dancing garb that we see her in.
I think this is the person behind everything. As you said, she is Maggie and Frank and all the other people that work in that office, reluctantly having to go to HQ on occasion. They are all the people that do all that work that we see the end result of in the headlines, that massive spy ring broken and things like that. Though that doesn't tend to happen as often anymore. I mean, obviously in the 80s, it was a massive thing.
Yes. So, and of course, they didn't have the benefit of technology. So it literally was legwork on the ground, you know, sitting in cafes for hours on end. You didn't have the benefit of CCTV that they do now. But, you know, I do know that modern day policing does involve surveillance, but perhaps less so than it used to. So they are literally legs on the ground every day. Every day they have to watch the Russian embassy, because of the KGB is the ultimate enemy in the Cold War. And we have to remember it was a different time. Russia and the Western side were you know, at loggerheads. It was an invisible war, but it was a war.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the intelligence and everything else. One of the things that you talk about in the book is the number of traitors, those who were double agents, who were spying for Russia, spying for England, giving different information to each one. And I found that element of it fascinating, because obviously it does play a great part in the entire plot.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like it's a hidden plot point almost. Because obviously you start to have suspicions about other people, and it's like, well, is that person a double agent? And of course it goes back to the trust no one element that you do tend to think of when you're doing anything that could be considered confidential.
Yeah, and we're still living it now. People think that, you know, oh yes, Russian sleeper spies living in England, they're a part of the past and the Cold War. Well, we've just had the Bulgarian trial, modern day trial of a whole load of Bulgarians spying for the Russians. Just called, you know, they were living in a guest house in Norfolk, and one of them was working in a beauty bar. So, you know, it still happens. We are still surrounded by intelligence all the time.
Because it's just information is valuable.
Yeah, and it's because you know, there's far more electronics now. I've just pared it back, and I will never write a spy book about modern day spying, because I just can't do the technology.
Not only that, I think this element of it gives you far more insight into the characters. What are you going to do? Write a spy novel about somebody sitting at a computer all day?
Yeah, and I take my hat off to the modern day spy novelists, because they make it interesting. They do make it human, and they do make it interesting. I just can't do the tech. So Maggie does a lot of running in and out of phone boxes. And I love that element, that they literally have to phone someone, hope that they're in. And you know, there's no mobiles.
But that was our childhood.
It was our childhood, and we can very quickly forget that. So I think it really takes it back to the human base elements.
I think that's it. This was I mean, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but it does take you back to that time where it was, in a way, far more romanticized, because you would look at that and go, oh, it's really glamorous. Spying was really glamorous with the suits and the cigars and the martinis, thinking to James Bond in his earlier days, because that's how he was, even in the movies going up to probably the late 80s. He was still that man who went to a casino and was smoking cigars and drinking martinis with the girlfriend of the person he was trying to spy on.
Yeah.
And all the glamorous dresses and everything else. And this sort of takes that, but it also makes it very real. It removes that layer of allure almost.
I think it's like looking behind a stage set. You know, where you've got Bond on stage at the front, and you look behind the scenes, and it's a bit more chaotic than you would ever imagine. But it functions. And it functions because people do their jobs, and you know, there's people like Maggie and Frank.
Yeah, but I think the thing with this is you do have those elements in the book of the incredible intrigue, because definitely not giving any of the bigger plot points away, but you do have the Russian spy. You do have those moments where you think, oh, is this going to end well? Is this going to end with somebody that we like in this book dead, maybe? Because you have those moments where it's like, wow, okay, that was a big twist. I was not expecting that. And I truly did get to certain plot points and think, is that actually going to end well? Because I can't see how this is going to end in a good way for this particular character. And I think that is that does add that moment of desperation, and maybe the James Bond, not glamour, but definite intrigue.
Good. Well, that's what we're always hoping for as writers. We're always hoping for that ooh moment, because when I'm reading, that's what I love as well. That kind of ooh, I didn't expect that moment.
Yeah.
So you're right. That's where we're going. And this is my first. I've written a sort of historical adventure. I've written wartime. I've written post-war with a crime element. But this is my first seriously spy book. And so that's exactly what I was looking for.
Would you write another with Maggie as the main character?
Well, I've just come back from Budapest, so number 2 is in production at the moment. So,
fantastic. Yes. So, because I think Maggie is one of those characters, she has got so much potential for growth, because she's done the family thing. She's got her daughter. She's living with her mum. And obviously, the events in this book have given her connections,
and she uses them. And so it's changed up. Yeah, we can't go back to the 60s of, you know, later years, her running around London. So it's going to be a big change up for Maggie in the second one.
Oh, fantastic!
And whole cast of new characters. Whole cast of new characters. Yeah. So I'm taking her behind the Iron Curtain.
I also love Yuri.
Yeah, Yuri. Yeah,
I love Yuri. I really did love him.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Russian spies are human. They're human too. You know, every ilk of spy is a human at the base of it. So I think that's what I was trying to say. That is, you know, there may be betrayal, but there's sometimes reasons behind it. And a lot of the time it's family. You know, it's family and wanting a better life.
Which goes back to Matahari.
Absolutely. We're all at the end of it.
Good for her daughter. And as we've already discussed, her desperation to find those golden tickets for the Beatles concert.
Yeah, which will make her Mother of the Year in, you know, her daughter's eyes. And that's the biggest accolade that she can have, is to do good things for her fatherless daughter, basically, and to keep life good for her.
Even while she's putting herself in potential serious peril.
Yeah, it's what you do, isn't it? It's what you do as a mother.
Well, all I am is a mother to a cat. So
you would probably give up a lot for your cat.
sometimes. But I think that was with Maggie. She had so many dimensions, so many layers to her, because there were so many parts of, she'd almost separated parts of her life out, as though, well, I can separate the spy from the mum and the daughter, but then everything merged because she realized that there was no separation, because all the time she was doing one, the other two were in the line of fire, even if they were unintentional.
Yeah. And so, you know, part of it she pushes along herself. Part of it comes as a coincidence, but she can't let it go. She's not a person. She's a determined, she was in the war driving ambulances, and, she's a person that doesn't shy away from anything. And so she needed to know for herself, if she's to move on in life without her husband, she had to know a certain thing.
And there was also, it felt like there was almost a little bit of anger at her husband for doing these things and putting her in this position in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that human to have that?
Yeah.
Someone dies and leaves you with a lot of rubbish behind in your life, and yeah, of course you're going to be angry. So it's her way of dealing with it. And I just try to put myself in her shoes and think, how would I feel about that? And that's what I do with all my characters, what a lot of writers do, of course.
Yeah, but you made them human with and detached them from your reality, which is very, very different. I'm guessing you're not a spy.
Who knows?
I was going to say, if you were, you wouldn't be able to tell me anyway. But it's that element of, obviously, you're not a spy in the Cold War. And I think a lot of us, because we weren't, well, I was alive, but because a lot of readers weren't alive during this time, it feels almost unrealistic.
Yeah, we
know that it really happened.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that back in 1963 was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the world was literally on a knife edge for 12, 13 days as to whether or not everybody would be annihilated. And it happened again in the 80s when we, in the big Star Wars years, and Russia and America were at loggerheads, and we were.
I mean, how many joking headlines were there about Reagan's Star Wars project?
But it was real, and people were very afraid. And I remember watching the news each night, and my parents being very concerned. And I do remember that. Because I lived through that bit. So yeah, I think we have to take it.
People talk about Chernobyl and, oh, well, this, that, and the other, it didn't affect us. But I can remember sitting in the dining room with my mum, listening to the radio, and them talking about when the toxic cloud was going to hit us.
Yeah. So these things do affect us. And the Cold War was, I imagine that I think there's a fantastic line that Judi Dench says, doesn't she, in, I think, might be the first Daniel Craig Bond film, where she says, "Oh Christ, I miss the Cold War," where it was so much more overt. You battled, the Russians were the enemy, and you knew they were the enemy. And now it's very shadowy. There are multiple cultures and races involved, whereas before it was basically Russia against the rest of the world.
It's far more insidious these days, because anybody could be plotting against you, whereas, as you said then, it was very clear it was the Russians. Sorry, Russia. Sorry, Russians who are listening. But it was the Russians and the Western world. There was no two ways about it. That was the way it was. There was this very, very clear separation.
And it was a game. It was a game. We want your intelligence. You want our intelligence. And it was a game, but it was a very dangerous game at the same time. People died. Traitors were shot. Those sorts of things. So it was a game, but it was a dangerous game.
Yeah.
And so Maggie's in the midst of this dangerous game, but I wouldn't say it was a harrowing book.
No, definitely not. I think that there were certain moments of it that were incredibly lighthearted, like when she was going to find a black market ticket seller, or when she was meeting Frank in a pub.
Yeah, I mean, they're all real. They're all real places that I researched, and some of them which are still there now. They're still there now. Some of these 60s, the pubs and the cafes are still there now. You can still go to the Blue Post.
I was going to say, it's scary to realise that 60s was 70 years ago. No, 60 years ago. 60 years ago?
60 years ago, yeah, 60 years ago this year.
Yeah, that is quite scary. But at the same time, it's not that long ago in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I really enjoyed the book. I loved finding out about all these characters and finding that because some of them did have very, not sinister, but very unusual ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And there were certain characters that just leapt off the page as, oh, you're slime, which I like.
And some of their motives, some of their motives might seem really out there and really outlandish, but they are all based on fact. They are all based on fact. So yes, I have played with them. That's what writers do. They embellish things, they embroider things, but every part of the book has a basis in fact.
That makes it a little bit more terrifying. Thinking about the end revelation, that makes it a little bit more terrifying. But then it just reminds me of certain elements of what was happening in Russia at that time anyway.
Yeah.
Certain industries, certain careers, and the way that things were handled. Yeah, and that's yes, based in fact. And our fact or Russia's?
Both. So I read an awful lot of non-fiction books about spies and the spy world and the Cold War and Kim Philby and the Cambridge Spies and, all of that. I read an awful lot. And Stella Rimington's autobiography is really good because it shows you what a woman was doing in, there actually weren't any case officers as she went in 1979. So yes, I've played around with dates and I've played around with things, but it's fiction. I get to do that.
Then you do mention things that people will recognize because of TV shows, but I recognize because of the 80s movie with Joanne Whalley about the Profumo affair.
Yeah.
Because of what her colleague has done that was very silly.
Yes. Yeah. So, everything there is based on fact that happens. It's just sort of dressed up a bit as fiction does.
Yeah. But the Profumo affair, to be fair, you didn't have to dress up because that was a massive thing. And they were still talking about it in the 80s. So
people still refer to it now. If you say the word Profumo, everybody knows what you mean.
Absolutely. And though people probably don't all remember the film, but they will remember the TV series and the fact that Christine Keeler was incredibly powerful in many ways. The amount of people that she brought down with her.
Yeah. And then was a victim herself, which was, sad in itself. Yeah.
But those things, though, the book highlights how loose lips sink ships was still a very, very big thing during that period of time, because you didn't, as we said, you didn't know who was. Anybody could be a Russian sleeper.
Yeah.
Anybody could be working for the enemy, and they will get into your life however they need to. And this was definitely proved with that entire incident and the way that it unfolded for her colleague.
Yeah. And also, don't forget, it was all word of mouth. There was no WhatsApp. There was no, catching somebody on your phone or anything like that. It had to be, surveillance had to be pointed, and it had to be directed because nobody carried around a cine camera with them.
Yeah, it was the honey trap before the honey trap.
Yeah.
And I think that was definitely highlighted in this book. I mean, Maggie obviously wasn't as glamorous as her friend and everything, and she also didn't have that female confidence. And she didn't want to move on, really. That came across quite a lot. She was still clinging to the fact that she missed her husband, even though he had done certain things that she did discover that were they weren't questionable, I don't think. I think they were maybe a little bit misguided or misunderstood.
Yeah. Good intentions. He had good intentions.
He had good intentions. It just didn't work out the way he needed it to or wanted it to.
No.
To be fair, wanted it to. But then I don't think she'd have ever been the kind of seductress that her friend was. She felt really lonely in some ways.
Yeah, she is lonely because she misses her husband, and she's got this, life that's, her shifts are all over the place, and so she doesn't have to get. And so her bedrock is Gilda, her mother, who is, is not that much of a bedrock because she's very, very bohemian and
Yes.
all over the shop. And her daughter, basically, everything that she does is to make the world a better place for her daughter.
Yes, for some reason she reminded me of Endora, Gilda. I just imagine her wandering around in these massive floaty day gowns.
Yeah.
Smoking a cigarette and lighting candles and waving sage around. I don't know why.
Well, there's a very, very bohemian bent to Gilda. Poor old Gilda. She's had a life where she was in the kitchen for a lot of her life, and now she's broken out of the kitchen.
Yeah, but that's a good thing.
Absolutely good thing. That's what I think.
But they're three very, very different personalities in the house.
And three women, all in the different personalities in the house. And so you can imagine the clashing that goes on.
Well, I grew up in a house with three women and a man. My brother, me, my sister, and my mum.
Yeah.
And we are all very, very different. And yes, we did a lot of clashing until I moved out.
Yeah. So that's the typical household that she lives in. And so, her job becomes her solace as well as a complication as well.
I suppose in a way it's also isolating, because if you're in that kind of work, who do you trust?
Absolutely. She can only talk to people about it who've also signed the Official Secrets Act. And so it's Frank, it's the rest of the donkeys, and it's her friend Vivian.
Yeah. And her friend Vivian is the one she gets out of a massive, great big hole that she digs for herself.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think that Vivian digs that hole for herself because she is in many ways, like Maggie, isolated by her job.
Yeah. And also, Vivian has been let down by her husband in a different way. Yeah,
which is, I think that's the thing. You've got so many facets of these characters, and they are so well created. They feel real, and that's what you want out of a book. You don't want to, if you're reading a book that isn't fantasy or science fiction, you want to read about real people and real experiences. And that's what these characters have given us. They've given you that real feeling about their emotions, their heartbreak, their grief, their anger, and their determination. And Maggie has all of those things.
Yeah.
But then so does Frank in many ways too. He's very similar to her, just has lived a slightly different life, being a man, got far more advantages than her.
Yeah. But he's a good sort. He's a good egg, and there's lots of egg references in there as well.
Yeah, yes, there are lots of egg references. Like that. Oh, we're going to the egg. Oh, let's have an egg.
The golden egg. I don't know if any of the readers are old enough to remember the golden egg. It was like a sort of, it was like a wimpy bar. And I remember them when I was growing up. The golden egg was a very sort of, it was like a wimpy bar, but it specialized in eggs, and everything inside it looked like an egg. It had yellow lighting, and it had oval menus, white clean menus, which was the placemats, and the menu was on the placemat, and everything was egg and chips, egg and bacon.
I don't remember that. I don't know if it was a thing that was right down on the south coast. We do have a couple of
quite a lot of them in London. Apparently they were favoured by mods because they opened late, and they kept open late, and mods would sort of have the evening out and then go for their egg and chips. Yeah, the egg was a great thing. So I think I had to bring the egg back.
Yes, and they enjoy a lot of egg.
They do. Really there's a lot of egg.
Yes, but that's not a bad thing. It's almost like you're giving them this thing to bond with, so you can know if they're going to that certain pub, they are going to confide in each other because they know that it's safe. They're going somewhere else, that is because they're observing other people. You get to know a lot of different locations through Maggie's poor walks on her bunion.
Yes, you do. And like I say, so many of them still there. So the Bar Italia is still going strong in Soho. The Blue Post, a pub on the corner of where they are, is still going strong. And the Westminster Cafe in Pimlico is still going strong there as well.
Wow.
So all of those places are, were there in the 60s and still there now.
That's great. That means that you've got access to all that history without the nightmare of, well, would that have been there? And thinking, am I making something up that would never have existed? It gives
Occasionally you have to do that. There are times when I have trawled through the internet for hours looking for pictures of places and you just can't find it. There's just nothing there. And sometimes you do. We are fiction writers. We make it up.
Yes. But it's always helpful when it comes to certain things to have something that is a basis in fact. So you've got something to refer to.
Yeah. I like to ground it in reality. And then sort of take my embroidery needle and fiddle about with it.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing with characters. You've added that addition. You've added a dimension to them.
Hope so.
And it's fun. I really did enjoy it. I am not somebody who reads a lot of spy novels. I think I read the first Smiley novel for an episode about 3 years ago with a friend, and that was the first time I'd ever read Le Carré. First time ever. And I've read a few Fleming and Bang Bang, which is probably which is not a spy thriller, but it is a novel by Fleming. And I've read a few other spy novels along the way, but this was the first one I've read where a woman has been the lead. And I liked that element because, as you said, you've given her a role that would have been so unobtrusive, and because it's meant to be. But she is doing all the legwork. She is doing all the research that somebody would need to complete a mission. Yeah. But at the same time, you've built this story underneath it all that's leading to this huge revelation. We're not going to give away that really couples a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, again, that story's for you, isn't it? You can't just you can't just write 90,000 words on somebody's day diary. There has to be something happening, and there has to be an end point to it and a resolve. I like to read novels that have a resolve at the end of them. I don't like to be left hanging, and so I don't think I'll ever write a novel that doesn't have some sort of resolve. Even if
just the cliffhanger at the end of EastEnders.
No, I couldn't leave on that. So anybody who reads my books will know that always will be a resolve at the end of it, even if the character carries on.
Yeah, and I'm looking. I can't wait to read the next one in Maggie's life because of the way that this one ended. I think it really does lend itself to a series because she's a fantastic spy, even though she's not a spy that goes to all the glamorous events and everything. She is the person that's done all of this groundwork.
Yeah. So she's real. Like I say, she's a real person, and that's her strength, is that she thinks like your average person. So she thinks, what would they be doing? Where will they be going? What will they be doing? And she's good at second guessing the people that she's observing.
But then a lot of that comes from her experience working as a store detective as well, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And her experience as a mum and living through the war and all of that, just being an average person who goes to the shops and just has to cook the dinner and that sort of thing. It's her strength is that she's grounded in reality.
And I think that's the thing that we forget as people in general, is that certain elements of our character are our strengths. Because people watching is something I absolutely love doing. Yeah. And I'll watch someone and I'll go, oh, I just saw that person 10 minutes ago. They were going in that. Why are they there? And you don't even realize that you're doing it. But Maggie, with the inner voice that we get from her, with those little snippets of which almost feel like she's writing up her report, but it's her mental voice, really show how her mind works.
Yeah. So that was the intention for that. So I'm glad it worked. I'm really glad it worked.
I enjoyed those books. I enjoyed those as she was watching people on a date or watching a man talk to somebody. I absolutely loved that little insight, the little snippets that we got that were a different typeface and everything. So they really stood out on the page, but they also stood out as her inner voice rather than everything that was going on around her, because they were so focused.
Yeah. And that comes from me, because I'm a huge coffee shop. Anybody who knows me knows that I spend half my life in a coffee shop working, chatting, and I'm always conscious of people coming and going and watching. And, I think I get that from my mum. She's a big people watcher as well. So that's my favorite thing in life, is to sit in a coffee shop with a good book, but also watching people around me. So that very much comes from just me and life.
Which is great. If you could define this book with just one sentence, what would it be?
Day-to-day woman goes out of her comfort zone. Big time.
Has to have a qualifier at the end of it, because she definitely does that. But this has been fantastic. I can't wait for the next one, and I know it's going to be a while, because this one
next May. It will be out next May. It will be out a year from this release.
Oh, that's really good. Thank you so much for joining me today. I loved getting back into the head of Maggie, because I read this a while ago now. Really loved getting back into her head, and seriously cannot wait for the next one. But this book comes out on the 15th of May.
It does, yeah.
And do you have any socials or anything that you are using to promote?
So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, not so much Twitter these days, but I am a presence around there. So it will be, we'll be starting all the socials soon, and doing a few festivals, small festivals around the country as well.
Oh, fantastic. So I've noticed there are quite a few of those coming up in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Right.
So a few festivals coming up where I'll be talking, and hopefully be on panels with other spy authors as well.
Brilliant. I know that there are, I was going to say, but that's a thriller festival in Harrogate, isn't it?
Harrogate, I'll be in Harrogate, but as a punter. I'll be in Harrogate as a punter.
People will be able to sort of segue towards you and say, hello.
Please do. God, that's a writer's dream, is to be approached, and say, I've read your book. But yeah, I'll be there because I love Harrogate as if you're into crime books and you like crime, then it's a dream to go.
Yeah, it's a very, very big one. I think they have a crime day down here in Shoreham as well. I think that happened last month, I believe.
Yeah, so there's quite a few good crime ones. There's capital crime as well. So yeah, there's loads, but I'm looking forward to Harrogate.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much. And Maggie Flynn is amazing. She really is. She's general everyday person that you pass on the street, and there's so much to her. Hidden
depths, as they say.
Yeah. Hidden depths, or layered like an onion, as Shrek would say.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for this week, and thank you again to Mandy for joining me to talk about her new novel, Mrs. Spy, which is out on the 15th of May. And thank you to everyone who's listening and has been listening for the last 4.5 years. Seriously, it's so appreciated, and I hope you enjoy what I talk about. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you might listen. Believe it or not, it really does help with the algorithm. You can follow me on Instagram as Being Bookish Pod, on X as Being_Bookish, and on TikTok, where I have started posting really short reviews of my recent reads, where I am at Being Bookish Reviews. Of course, if you prefer to read everything, as many readers do, you can find some spoiler-free reviews and my 2025 reading tracker, plus all the links to my past episodes on my website, beingbookish.co.uk. And until next time, this is me saying farewell.